Hello. Happy Wednesday. Farmhouse says, book, bookie, book. How's it going? Farmhouse, are you able to check if my audio's coming through okay? I'll give you a moment to... There. Oh, there's a pupper. Hello, pupper. Also, there's a... I'm gonna move... Get that out of the way, huh? Sounds good? Oh, good. What's this? What's this? Sharp, 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 sharp. Is anyone else here? Or just a farmhouse? Thought you saw something? I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know. Did you mean puppy? Hey, Bin. Hello. You do see puppy. There he is. That's a puppy. I'm a bit tired. Just a little bit. Just a little bit tired. Did the oh. Did the VR headset get knocked down? I'm gonna say that it did. I'm gonna say it got knocked over at some point. That's... Hello. What are you trying to give me? A toy? Oh, it's slimy. Oh. Oh no, slimy. Hi. You're gonna demand attention while I'm doing this, aren't you? You want me to take that? Hello, Sharkies. How are you? Happy Wednesday. Here, let's come around this side and say hello to the Sharkies. Can you come up? Can you come up? Can you come up? Here, give me that. Here. Oh. Oh. Who's this? Go get. We have a guest appearance. Happy Wednesday, Sharkies. Farmhouse says, been a bit grew. Yeah, that's definitely what's going on here. How's it going? How are you today? How's your week been? Oh, okay. Really wants me to play tug of war and fetch. We are being visited by my nibbling and their dog until Sunday. It's been a half normal week. Still half still spring break. I see. You're gonna just keep giving me this all stream, aren't you? It's a weird toy that's very crunchy sounding. Oh boy. He's just crunching away down here. He and Benedict get along, but I think Benedict gets a little nervous. A little like, yeah. Chucky say last week both kids were on spring break. This week one is back at school. Oh, that's a little awkward, isn't it? That's a bit strange. How do you keep things feeling fair like that? That's I don't know about that. I wouldn't want to be the one that's back in school while preschool is back in session this week. I have something I do. Some kind of fuzz. I'm a bit tired tonight. I had one of those sleeps last night where like I got to sleep, but then I kept waking up. Like I think I was having like little mini dreams and then waking up and then a little mini dream and then waking up again. And so I just didn't really feel like I got actual sleep once it was time to get up in the morning. You licking your foot? You licking your foot? I wonder if I can summon Benedict. 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 Here, this one's for you. This one's for Benedict. This one's for you. Good boy. Double pups. Good boy, Benedict. Good boy. You want another one? You definitely deserve a follow-up treat. Yeah, he's a little nervous. Benedict and Finnegan. Benedict, Finnegan. Finnegan likes to sit right up next to me, so it's not really getting them both on camera. That's okay. Guess I could. Oh, double pups. Look at those eyes. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Shake, shake, shake. All right, let's bring that back to roughly the right level. Okay. Well, we are getting pretty far along in this book, huh? We're getting pretty close. We are on page 227 out of 300 and what, 22? Yeah. So less than 100 pages to go. 227 out of 322. Did I put this too high up now? I think I did. The dangers of readjusting the camera. Oh, and now it's like crooked. Oh boy. Oh, I've ruined everything. There. That's a little better. Right? That's a little better. So, on the note of being less than 100 pages to go, I think at this point it's probably pretty safe to say that we are going to, at some point or another, finish this series. You know, I think everybody's pretty invested at this point. But that doesn't mean that we have to go straight into the next book after we finish this one. I mean, I would be quite happy. What's the next one? After Queen of Sorcery is, what, like Magician's Gambit? Yeah, it's Magician's Gambit next. So we could do that. Or we could think about going back to maybe Discworld, um, reading like Men at Arms or something like that, or even a different series from Discworld, or something entirely different just to take a break. I don't think I want to personally start another full series if we were going to read another book. Like the Discworld books are part of a series, but they're all one-offs, right? None of them like have a plot that leaves you hanging that you need to go into the next book to finish. But I wouldn't necessarily want to start another series. But yeah, either I would like for me, I'd be happy enough doing the next book in this series, um, or some kind of one-off. That's my opinion. But we still do have almost 100 pages to go, so we don't need to figure that out just yet. But, you know, it's something to think about, something to start pondering. Yeah. So, the last chapter was a little spooky. We had could say this like the title of a horror movie from the 50s and 60s or something, you know? Attack of the Mudmen from Nyissa. The Zomboggies, right. The Zombuggying Zomboggies. Okay, Finn, you gotta stop licking your foot, pal. You gotta stop licking your foot. You're gonna irritate it. Yeah, we had the Zomboggies, and Durnick climbed a tree. That's right. Off camera, as it were. Everyone was worrying about Durnick, and he climbed a tree. Although he was saying, which you know I think was a good call. I wouldn't expect them to be able to climb, but apparently they almost did. And then Aunt Pole and Mr. Wolf destroyed them with rain. I'm a little uncertain exactly what Mr. Wolf's contribution there actually did. He like shot fire up into the clouds before the rain. Farmo says today is our first day with Finn, so I think he's just starting to get anxious about missing his dad. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the case. Sharky say, "It's over, Mudmen. I have the high ground." Durnick, probably. Seems about right. That sounds like something Durnick would say. I can't think of that fitting in any other franchise but this one. Farmos ponders that maybe Aunt Pole needed Mr. Wolf to make the clouds in order to make the rain or something. Maybe that's what the fire was. Yeah, what did it actually say when he did it? He thrust one hand forward, palm up. "Fire," he commanded, and a sizzling bolt of lightning shot upward from his hand into the whirling clouds overhead. Yeah, because the clouds came along with the Mudmen. The earth trembled with the violence of the shattering thunderclap. And then Aunt Pole said water, and the clouds burst open and rain. Maybe it was just like a getting things started sort of thing, like priming the clouds for rain somehow. Sharky say that's what I assumed, that Mr. Wolf made them storm clouds. Yeah, that's fair. It was probably something like that, basically. Him priming them and then her pulling the water down. "I think we're all on the same page," says Farmhouse. "Yes, 227. Unless the Sharkies edition is different, and then we're not all on the same page exactly." Farmhouse says, "Because book." Yeah. He's having a nap now, or at least chilling. Yeah, so I think that's sort of the majority of what we went through in the last stream was, well, not entirely. Did we also have the... Yeah, we also had the bath last stream, didn't we? The bathing in the pond. We're 230 for chapter 21. Oh, geez, wow. That's like, I'm basically right at the top of 227. That's a pretty significant change. But yours didn't have chapters starting partway through, right? Awkward bath flirting. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so we had awkward teen flirting, and then Mudmen from Nyssa. And also, then after the Mudmen, the interview with the snake. Here starts a chapter on a new page. Oh, it's, I guess, over 21 chapters, it adds up to a whole 3 pages difference. Interesting. Irma says, yes, talking to snake. Interview with a snake. The Mudmen from Nyssa and interview with a snake. Sharkies are surprised they let that snake live. Someone has to send the message back, apparently. Plus, I mean, realistically, the snake is unlikely to cause them any further problems, right? I don't think the snake is what made the Mudmen. And there are probably many, many, many more snakes in Nyssa. So letting one go versus killing that one. Like, I think Barak or Silk or Hetar or Mandaralin would all happily kill the snake. But Aunt Pole, I think, is too practical to be that vengeful toward a snake. And since Aunt Pole was the one taking control of things at that time, the snake gets to keep its skin for now until it sheds next. All right, well, I think it's about time to hop on into chapter 21. No mini cakes so far. All right, everybody ready? Ready? Chapter 21. Garion's sleep that night was troubled. Well, there's a shocker. I wonder what could cause troubled sleep for our boy Garion. What do you think might be responsible for Garion having troubled sleep that night? Sorry, let me do that again. Garion's sleep that night was troubled. He awoke frequently, shuddering at the remembered touch of the Mudmen. But, in time, the night, as all nights must, came to an end, and the morning dawned clear and bright. He drowsed for a while, rolled in his blankets, until Sinedra came to get him up. What are you doing, bud? What are you doing? Making little grunty noises. Sharky says, snakes don't make mudmen. I do. Yes, sir. Pharma says, zombuggies and awkward flirting? Nightmare fuel. Garion, she said softly, touching his shoulder. Are you awake? He opened his eyes and looked up at her. Good morning. Lady Polgara says that you're supposed to get up, she told him. Garion yawned, stretched, and sat up. He glanced out the tent flap and saw that the sun was shining. She's teaching me how to cook, Sinedra said rather proudly. That's nice, Garion told her, pushing his hair out of his eyes. She looked at him for a long moment, her small face serious and her green eyes intent. Garion. Yes? You were very brave yesterday. He shrugged slightly. I'll probably get a scolding for it today. What for? Aunt Pole and my grandfather don't like it when I try to be brave, he explained. They think I'm still a child, and they don't want me to get hurt. Sharky say, The Touch of the Mudmen does not sound like a movie or book I'd like. And Farmo says, Aw, she's being nice. Garion, Aunt Pole called from the small fire where she was cooking. I need more firewood. Garion sighed and rolled out of his blankets. He pulled on his half-boots, belted on his sword, and went off into the woods. It was still damp under the huge oaks from the downpour Aunt Pole had called down the day before, and dry wood was hard to find. He wandered about, pulling limbs out from under fallen trees and from beneath overhanging rocks. The silent trees watched him, but they seemed somehow less unfriendly this morning. What are you doing? A light voice came from above him. He looked up quickly, his hand going to his sword. A girl was standing on a broad limb just over his head. She wore a belted tunic and sandals. Her hair was a tawny color. Her gray eyes were curious. Her hair was a tawny color, her gray eyes were curious, and her pale skin had that faint greenish hue to it that identified her as a Dryad. In her left hand she held a bow, and her right held an arrow against the taut string. The arrow was pointed directly at Garion. He carefully took his hand away from his sword. I'm gathering wood, he said. What for? My aunt needs it for the fire, he explained. Fire? The girl's face hardened, and she half drew her bow. A small one, he said quickly, for cooking. Fire isn't permitted here, the girl said sternly. You will have to explain that to Aunt Pole, Garion told her. I just do what I'm told. The girl whistled, and another girl came from behind a nearby tree. She also carried a bow. Her hair was almost as red as Senedra's, and her skin was also touched with the color of leaves. It says it's gathering wood, the first girl reported, for a fire. Do you think I should kill it? Xantha says we're supposed to find out who they are, the red-haired one said thoughtfully. If it turns out that they don't have any business here, then you can kill it. Oh, very well, the tawny-haired girl agreed, with obvious disappointment. But don't forget that I found this one. When the time comes, I get to kill it. Garion felt the hair beginning to rise on the back of his neck. The red-haired one whistled, and a half-dozen other armed Dryads drifted out of the trees. They were all quite small, and their hair was various shades of reds and golds, not unlike the color of autumn leaves. They gathered about Garion, giggling and chattering as they examined him. That one is mine, the tawny-haired Dryad said, climbing down from the tree. I found it, and Zara says that I get to kill it. It looks healthy, one of the others observed, and quite tame. Maybe we should keep it. Is it a male? Another one giggled. Let's check and find out. Oh boy. I'm a male, Garion said quickly, blushing in spite of himself. It seems a shame to waste it, one remarked. Maybe we could keep it for a while and then kill it. It's mine. Hennigan, can you chill? Can you chill? He wants to play. Oh. It's mine, the tawny-haired Dryad stated stubbornly. And if I want to kill it, I will. Farmos doesn't know if his toy can be heard. I'm guessing it can. The microphone's pretty sensitive. Let's go look at the others. Oh, sorry. If I want to kill it, I will. She took hold of Garion's arm, possessively. Maybe I shouldn't have done that if I didn't want the noise continuing, but how can I resist? How can I resist? Sharkies can hear it a bit. It's an interesting... They were all having a discussion about whether or not to kill or keep Garion. And the one that's like holding his arm is insisting that if she wants to kill it, they're all referring to him as it. Yeah. Alright, well, let's continue. Let's go look at the others, the one called Zera suggested. They're building fires, and we'll want to stop that. Fires? Several of the others gasped, and they all glared at Garion. They all glared at Garion accusingly. Farmo says it's a bit strange to have sentient creatures refer to other sentient creatures as it. Yeah, I guess we have established they are not human, and their entire society is female, so maybe they don't have much use for pronouns. It doesn't 100% hold up, because I'm sure they're aware of like animals being like they're aware of male and female, they've mentioned, but that's the best I can come up with. It's either just they don't have much use for pronouns in general, or they specifically just refer to humans that way because they're not humans. Something like that. Fires? Several of the others gasped, and they all glared at Garion accusingly. Only a small one, Garion said quickly. Bring it along, Zera ordered, and started off through the wood toward the tents. Far overhead, the trees murmured to each other. Aunt Pole was waiting calmly when they reached the clearing where the tents were. She looked at the Dryads clustered around Garion without changing expression. Welcome, ladies, she said. The Dryads began whispering to each other. Senedra, the one called Zera exclaimed. Cousin Zera, Senedra replied, and the two ran to embrace each other. The other Dryads came out a little farther into the clearing, looking nervously at the fire. Senedra spoke quickly with Zera, explaining to her cousin who they were, and Zera motioned for the others to come closer. It seems that these are friends, she said. We'll take them to my mother, Queen Xantha. Does that mean that I won't get to kill this one? The tawny-haired Dryad demanded petulantly, pointing a small finger at Garion. I'm afraid not, Zera answered. The tawny one stamped away, pouting. Garion breathed a sigh of relief. Then Mr. Wolf came out of one of the tents and looked at the cluster of dryads with a broad smile. It's Belgarath! One of the Dryads squealed. Is that apostrophe correct? One of the Dryads apostrophe S? One of the Dryads squealed, and ran to him happily. She threw her arms around his neck, pulled his head down, and kissed him soundly. "Did you bring us any sweets?" she demanded. The old man put on a sober expression and began rummaging through his many pockets. Bits of sweetmeats began. Sweetmeats is such a weird word to me. I never know what to think of when I see the word sweetmeats. I don't know. It's not something. Oh, Sharky say they don't have the apostrophe, so it must be a typo. Yeah, mine's got one of the Dryads squealed and there's an apostrophe S. Sharky say teriyaki chicken bites for sweetmeats in his pocket. He keeps a bag of like honey maple jerky in there. Pharma says honey garlic. Bits of sweetmeats began to appear and just as quickly disappeared as the Dryads gathered about him, snatching them as fast as he took them from his pockets. "Have you got any new stories for us?" one of the Dryads asked. "Many stories," Wolf told her, touching one finger to the side of his nose slyly. "But we ought to wait so your sisters can hear them too, shouldn't we?" "We want one just for ourselves," the Dryad said. "And what would you give me for this special story?" "Kisses," the Dryad offered promptly. 5 kisses from each of us." Sharkies say, "Ham." "I've got a very good story," Wolf bargained. "It's worth more than 5. Let's say 10. 8, the little Dryad countered. Pharma says, "Cram." "All right," Wolf agreed. 8 sounds about right. "I see you've been here before, old wolf," Aunt Pole remarked dryly. "I visit from time to time," he admitted with a bland expression. "Those sweets aren't good for them, you know," she chided. "A little bit won't hurt them, Pole," he said, "and they like them very much. A Dryad will do almost anything for sweets." "You're disgusting," she told him. It's not the most flattering light for Mr. Wolf. Doesn't sound very good, does it? Even if he's just exchanging for for kisses. But the Dryads were all clustered around Mr. Wolf, looking almost like a garden of spring flowers. All, that is, except for the tawny one who'd captured Geryon. She stood a bit apart, sulking and fingering the point of her arrow. She finally came over to Geryon. "You're not thinking about running away, are you?" she asked hopefully. "No," Geryon denied emphatically. She sighed with disappointment. "I don't suppose you'd consider it, would you? As a special favor to me?" "I'm sorry," he said. She sighed again, bitterly this time. "I never get to have any fun," she complained and went to join the others. "Please, let me kill you, just as a favor." Sharky say the tawny Dryad is sounding a little bit Pratchett-esque. And Permos says she's the Barak Dryad. Silk emerged from a tent, moving slowly and carefully, and after the Dryads had become accustomed to him, Dernick appeared. "They're just children, aren't they?" Geryon commented to Aunt Pole. "They seem to be," she said, "but they're much older than they look. A Dryad lives as long as her tree does, and oak trees live for a very long time." She just said long time. I threw in very for some reason. Oak trees live for a long time. "Where are the boy Dryads?" he asked. All I see are girls. There aren't any boy dryads, dear, she explained, returning to her cooking. Then how... I mean... He faltered and felt his ears growing hot. They catch human males for that, she said. Travelers and the like. Oh. He delicately let the subject drop. After they had eaten breakfast and carefully quenched their fire with water from the stream, they saddled their horses and started off through the wood. Mr. Wolf walked ahead with the tiny dryads still gathered around him, laughing and chattering like happy children. It's awkward, this bit here. They're clearly like, I say they, he, David Eddings, is making them sound childlike, but they're probably all quite old. So, and they've like kind of danced around the topic of, mating and sexuality with them, which is clearly awkward because, hey, they seem like they're kids, but they're not kids. I don't know. This bit's uncomfortable. The murmuring of the trees about them was no longer unfriendly, and they moved through a kind of welcoming rustle from a million leaves. It was late afternoon by the time they reached a large clearing in the center of the wood. Standing alone in the middle of the clearing was an oak so large that Garion could hardly accept the idea that anything so enormous could be alive. Here and there, in its mossy trunk, were openings almost like caverns. Wouldn't be a fantasy novel without a massive tree. And its lower limbs were as broad as highways, and they spread out to shade nearly the entire clearing. There was about the tree a sense of vast age and a patient wisdom. Tentatively, Garion felt a faint touch on his mind, almost like the soft brush of a leaf against his face. The touch was unlike anything he had ever felt before, but it also seemed to welcome him. Sharky say, well, Garion, when a man loves a tree very, very much... Was there a massive tree anywhere in Middle-earth? I would be shocked if there wasn't one somewhere in like the Silmarillion or something like that. But in like the Hobbit, I don't remember a particularly large tree in the Hobbit. There were many trees that were pretty big, but not like one stunningly huge tree. And I don't remember a particular, like, an individual massive tree in Lord of the Rings, but it's been a long time. Sharky say 2 actually in the West? Okay. Yep. Well, wouldn't be a fantasy novel without a huge tree somewhere. Just seems like you really want to drive home that this is a fantasy world? Put a really big tree in there. Like a really big one. Or maybe it's more along the lines of like the idea of a really big tree is just sort of captivating, and so therefore, if you're gonna write a fantasy world anyways, why not have it? It's just fun. That Bilbo had his birthday under? Oh, I see. Pharma says there was one in the Shire. Not massive, but big. I think that anything in the Shire was just like when I think of a really big tree, I'm thinking like something that doesn't exist on Earth. And I'm thinking the one that Bilbo had his birthday under probably could have existed on Earth, couldn't it? Sharky say there's a big old oak in the old forest. Just finished that part with the kids with Tom Bombadil. I see. And is it like shockingly large? Is it otherworldly large? Tom Bombadil. What a strange individual. A unique character. Farmos mentioned sequoia in California. Yeah, those are very, very big. I think those are something that like I have trouble imagining because I haven't seen them in person. I don't know whether or not the one that's in the Dryad forest, I'm thinking that this oak is supposed to be like bigger than that, but who knows. Turkey say, well, it traps 2 hobbits and it was described as having roots that extended through the whole forest. All right. Okay, let me get back to this. Garion felt a touch on his mind. It was faint like a leaf on his face, blah, blah. The tree was literally alive with dryads, clustering randomly on the limbs like blossoms. Their laughter and girlish chatter filled the air like bird songs. I'll tell my mother you've arrived, the one called Zera said, and went toward the tree. Garion and the others dismounted and stood uncertainly near their horses. From overhead, dryads peered curiously down at them, whispering among themselves and giggling often. For some reason, the frank, mirthful stares of the dryads made Garion feel very self-conscious. He moved closer to Aunt Pole and noticed that the others were also clustering around her, as if unconsciously seeking her protection. Where's the princess? She asked. She's just over there, Mistress Pole, Dernick answered, visiting with that group of dryads. Keep your eye on her, Aunt Pole said. And where's my vagrant father? Near the tree, Garion replied. The dryads seem very fond of him. The old fool, Aunt Pole said darkly. Then, from a hollow in the tree some distance above the first broad limbs, another dryad appeared. Instead of the short tunic the others wore, this one was garbed in a flowing green gown, and her golden hair was caught in with a circlet of what appeared to be mistletoe. Gracefully she descended to the ground. Aunt Pole went forward to meet her, and the others trailed behind at a respectful distance. Dear Polgara, the dryad said warmly, it's been so long. We all have our duties, Xantha, Aunt Pole explained. The two embraced fondly. Have you brought us these as gifts? Queen Xantha asked, looking admiringly at the men standing behind Aunt Pole. Aunt Pole laughed. I'm afraid not, Xantha. I'd be happy to give them to you, but I think I may need them later. Ah, well, the Queen said with a mock sigh. Welcome all, she greeted them. You'll sup with us, of course. We'd be delighted, Aunt Pole said. Then she took the Queen's arm. Can we talk for a moment first, Xantha? The two moved apart from the others and spoke quietly as the dryads carried bundles and sacks down from the hollows in the tree and began to lay a feast on the grass beneath the broad limbs. The meal, which was spread out, looked peculiar. The common food of the dryads seemed to consist entirely of fruits, nuts, and mushrooms, all prepared without any cooking. Barak sat down and looked sourly at what was offered. No meat, he grumbled. It heats up your blood anyway, Silk told him. Barak sipped suspiciously at his cup. Water, he said with distaste. You might find it a novelty to go to bed sober for a change, Aunt Pole observed as she rejoined them. I'm sure it's unhealthy, Barak said. Wow. Farmos commenting on deforestation, and Sharky saying, in Western traditions, probably all come from the stories of Yggdrasil, the world tree. Farmo says, ha ha, alcoholism. Yeah. I don't know if I agree about all of the big trees coming from the story of Yggdrasil. I think it's just a common fascination. You know, if I'm writing a fantasy story, I'm going to be really tempted to put a really big tree in there. And it's not because I'm thinking of Yggdrasil, it's because I think big tree cool. You know? Or if I've got foresty creatures, sentient forest types that are magical, I want to make them appear more magical, and it's really easy to do that by having them have a really big tree that they take care of. And maybe that's because I've been influenced by things that were influenced by things that were influenced by Yggdrasil. But I think even without that, there's still just sort of a fascination with the idea of a big tree. And I don't know if that needs to go all the way back to Yggdrasil for that to exist. I think Yggdrasil's just a really, prominent early source of something like that. And so, I mean, I can't say for certain that that my thinking is not influenced by that, because I can't separate my thoughts from what has influenced those thoughts. It's just not possible for me to do. But I do think that, I don't know. If Yggdrasil never existed and I still existed, I would still probably think, big tree, cool, and magic. Sharky say, but much like when we were reading The Hobbit and looked up the origin of dragons on treasure hoards, which in the Western tradition came from the Libelungelade, big magical trees might all have a Western ancestor in Yggdrasil. I mean, the thing is, there are on Earth trees. And, I live in an area where there are trees, and I've been to forests where there are quite large trees. And so I think it's easy to look at a tree and go, what if that tree was even bigger? Versus dragons are something that are largely agreed to be mythological, and we don't really have real world counterparts that I'm aware of. And then dragons sleeping on treasure hoards is even further more specific. It's this agreed upon behavior of a fantasy creature. So to me, those are a little bit different from each other. To me, I could picture myself as a child never having seen a big tree in fantasy literature and looking up at a tree and imagining a really, really big, fantastical tree. But if I didn't read ever about a dragon, I wouldn't necessarily imagine the same thing. Nibelungelade? Nibelungelade, I see. Pharma says, I'm pretty sure there are non-Western giant tree instances. If that's the case, it might be more of a human nature thing than a single origin. And Sharky say, I was just thinking as a possible tracing of Western lit specifically. Yeah, that's fair. I don't mean to say that there are no people that draw from Yggdrasil when they reference a big tree. I definitely agree. There's definitely going to be influences there. But I also think that it's just something that it's easy to come up with and easy to just blam, there you go. And there's lots of other big trees in non-Western literature, like Farmos was saying. But yeah, to me, dragons on treasure hoards is a slightly more unusual phenomenon, I suppose, in that it's this sort of agreed upon thing, right? And we've looked at where that comes from before. But big tree in fantasy setting, I think, is just a little more basic than that. A little easier to just imagine Maybe it's related to a previous work, or maybe it's just fantasy world. Have a big tree. Also, to me, like, there's a certain hopefulness about a big fantasy tree. There's like it's a present, in your face manifestation of magic existing, and doing well if the tree is healthy. Right? Because in some settings you've got like maybe magic's fading, or it's not all that common, or something like that. But if you've got a really big tree, there's at least a little bit of magic there. It feels a little hopeful. All right, let me. That's enough of me getting distracted by tree. Back to let's get past Barak's alcoholism. Sinedra seated herself near Queen Xantha. She obviously wanted to talk to her, but since there was no opportunity for privacy, she finally spoke out in front of them all. I have a favor to ask, Your Highness. You may ask, child, the Queen said, smiling. It's only a small thing, Sinedra explained. I'll need sanctuary for a few years. My father's growing unreasonable in his old age. I'll have to stay away from him until he comes to his senses. In what way is Ranborun growing unreasonable? Xantha asked. He won't let me go out of the palace, and he insists that I go to Riva on my 16th birthday, Sinedra said in an outraged tone. Have you ever heard of such a thing? And why does he want you to go to Riva? Some foolish treaty. No one even remembers the reason for it. If it's a treaty, it must be honored, dear, the Queen said gently. I won't go to Riva, Sinedra announced. I'll stay here until after my 16th birthday's passed, and that'll be the end of it. No, dear, the Queen said firmly. You won't. What? Sinedra was stunned. We have a treaty too, Xantha explained. Our agreement with the House of Borun is most explicit. Our wood remains inviolate only for so long as the female descendants of the Princess Zoria stay with the Boruns. It's your duty to remain with your father and to obey him. But I'm a Dryad, Sinedra wailed. I belong here. You're also human, the Queen said, and you belong with your father. I don't want to go to Riva, Sinedra protested. It's degrading. Xantha looked at her sternly. Don't be a foolish child, she said. Your duties are clear. You have a duty as a Dryad, as a Borun, and as an imperial princess. Your silly little whims are quite beside the point. If you have an obligation to go to Riva, then you must go. Sinedra appeared shaken by the finality of the Queen's tone, and she sulked in silence after that. I'm missing a lot of chat here. Farmos is saying, it's possible that someone writing Western Lit would be influenced by this human nature of ooh, big tree, cool, rather than specifically coming from Norse mythology, like maybe there are multiple influences, and it could be partially Norse mythology, but not likely the first only origin. Anyway, he wants to keep me safe. Madness. Sharky say, sounds like every teenager, basically. And Pharma says, ooh, silly little whims. That's a blow. So I have conflicting feelings about this. I mean, clearly, yes. There are all these treaties and obligations and reasons that Sinedra needs to follow these rules, right? She needs to stay with the Boruns so that the whole Dryad forest remains safe. That's important, right? Her doing that is an agreement that she, needs to do. And that's pretty important. Her needing to go to Riva on her 16th birthday because there's treaties that are agreed to and it maintains peace between the Empire and other kingdoms. Also important for that reason. But then, on the other hand, her saying, I don't want to go on my 16th birthday to wait to be some non existent person's bride, it's degrading. I think she's absolutely right. And if this were, a real world setting kind of thing, like, I don't know, I would be like, let her live her life, let her make her decisions. I'm not about forcing people to marry other people that they don't want to marry. So, I mean, but then again, I'm not royalty. But then again, does being born as royalty mean that you don't get to make your own decisions and live your own life? And I spilled on the ground. That was awesome. Luckily, I've got a napkin right here. Apparently, I didn't spill enough that I can even find it. Don't mind me. So, like I said, I've got conflicting opinions on this. I can go back and forth in either direction about how Sinedra is right or everybody else is right. It's weird. It's a weird thing. Right? Like, you should get to live your own life and you should get to choose who you marry. But if not going to a certain place at a certain time and possibly marrying someone who might show up would mean that nations would go to war, that's tricky. That's do you still get to make your own decisions and live your own life? Or is it just that the only correct decision is to follow through with what everyone wants you to do, but in that case you don't have a decision? Pharma says that's where it gets murky. Yeah. Yeah, it's complicated. I don't know. It's easy to say everyone should get to live their own life and make their own decisions. Right? I think that's an easy moral high ground to take. And I think ideally that's the case. But human politics are complicated. And apparently also Dryad politics. Pharma says, and I don't think she actually thinks she's going to have to marry someone there. No. Nobody thinks she's actually going to have to marry someone there. Sharkies once listened to a CBC program about the difference between a public versus a private life. And until the 20th century, basically, most people didn't have public lives except royalty and nobility. It's interesting. I'm curious about that. I mean, I suppose you could argue maybe like some merchants, if you're going to distinguish merchants from royalty and nobility, I would expect that, that some larger merchants would have, I don't know, do you consider customer service to be a public life? All right. Sinedra appeared shaken by the finality of the Queen's tone, and she sulked in silence after that. Then the Queen turned to Mr. Wolf. There are many rumors abroad, she said, and some of them have even reached us here. I think something momentous is happening out there in the world of the humans, and it may even touch our lives in this wood. I think I should know what this thing is. Wolf nodded gravely.
I expect you should, he agreed. The orb of Aldur has been stolen from the throne in the hall of the Revan King by Zedar the Apostate.
Xantha caught her breath. How? She demanded. Wolf spread his hands.
We don't know. Zedar's trying to reach the kingdoms of the Angarax with the orb. Once he's there, he'll try to use its powers to awaken Torak.
That must never happen, the Queen said. What's being done?
The Alorns and the Sendars are getting ready for war, Wolf replied. The Arends have promised aid, and Ranborun has been advised, though he didn't make any promises. The Boruns can be difficult at times.
He glanced at the pouting Sinedra. Then it means war? The Queen asked sadly.
I'm afraid so, Xantha, he said. I'm pursuing Zedar with these others, and I hope we can catch him and get the orb back before he can reach Torak with it. If we're successful, I think the Angarax will attack the west anyway, out of desperation. Certain ancient prophecies are getting close to their fulfillment. There are signs everywhere, and even the twisted perceptions of the Grolims can read them.
The Queen sighed. I've seen some of the signs myself, Belgarath, she said. I'd hoped I was wrong. What does this Zedar look like?
A great deal like me, Wolf told her.
I think that's at least the second time we've heard that Zedar and Belgarath look similar.
We served the same master for a very long time, and that puts a certain mark on people.
And there's the answer. It's not so much that Belgarath and Zedar look like each other, it's that they both look like Aldur. Okay, what have I missed? Talking about the royalty nobility thing, Sharky say it wasn't so much about being in public, but how public one's life was and how much influence they would have in larger events. Farmo says they wouldn't have them quite to the same magnitude at the very least. Sharky say Wolf spreads his hands, jazz hands. Farmo says, like today you can learn about so many more people's lives and they can become known to so many people quite suddenly and easily. Farmo says wizard hands. Yeah, and I mean today we have celebrities. And even more recently than that, like social media influencers and things like that who live very much in front of a camera, even if they're not the same necessarily as what you would consider a celebrity. They're similar anyways. So, Farmo says, the internet. Yeah, end of discussion. All right. So, we served the same master for a very long time, and that puts a certain mark on people. Someone like that passed through the upper reaches of our wood last week and crossed over into Nyissa, Xantha said. If I'd known, we might have been able to detain him.
We're closer than I thought, then. Was he alone?
No, Xantha reported. He had 2 of the servants of Torak with him, and a small boy. Wolf looked startled.
A boy?
Yes, about 6 years old or so. The old man frowned, and then his eyes opened very wide.
So that's how he did it, he exclaimed. I never thought of that.
Curious. We can show you where he crossed the river into Nyissa, the Queen offered. I should warn you, though, that it's going to be dangerous for so large a party to go there.
Salmisra has eyes everywhere in those swamps.
I've already made plans for that,
Mr. Wolf assured her. He turned to Barak.
Are you sure that ship's going to be waiting at the mouth of the River of the Woods? He asked.
She'll be there,
Barak rumbled.
Her captain's a dependable man.
Good,
Wolf said.
Silk and I'll pick up Zedar's trail then, and the rest of you can follow the river to the sea. Take the ship down the coast, and then up the River of the Serpent to this Tor. We'll meet you there.
Dost thou think it wise to separate our party in so perilous a place as Nyssa? Mandaralan asked. AKA, you really sure we should split the party?
It's necessary,
Wolf said.
The snake people are at home in their jungles, and they don't like outsiders. Silk and I can move swiftly and with greater stealth if we're alone.
Sharky say, never split the party! Respectfully, I disagree. There are instances where it's appropriate to split the party. However, if the GM or DM or storyteller or what have you asks something along the lines of, so you're going to split the party, or are you sure you want to split the party, then immediately keep together as a group and don't split the party. Sharky say, shopping trips? Shopping trips, it's appropriate to split the party. Or if you need to do something stealthily and you've got a knight in plate armor with you, it might be appropriate to split the party. Farmo says 90% of the time it's a bad idea. Also, I was gonna say if you're playing and also that's a very D&D centric thinking. There are other games where it's more appropriate to split the party. Farmo says that's not splitting the party, just a little stealth foray. That's if people go off by themselves, that's splitting the party. It counts. Because there is an opportunity for, say, a combat to happen in which party members are not present. But it could still be the appropriate thing to do. But I think there is a big stigma against splitting the party, and in some instances it's deserved, but I think that there are cases where the correct decision is splitting the party. Farmo says, shopping trips, though, frequently a good idea.
Where do you want us to meet you?
Barak asked. There's a Drasnian trade enclave near the wharves in Sith Tor, Silk said. Several of the merchants there are my friends. Just ask for Radek of Boktor. If we can't meet you there, we'll leave word of our whereabouts with the merchants. What about me? Sinedra asked. I think you'll have to stay with us, Aunt Pole answered. There's no reason for me to go to Nyssa, Sinedra said. You'll go because I tell you to go, Aunt Pole told the tiny girl. I'm not your father, Sinedra. Your pouting doesn't wring my heart, and your fluttering eyelashes don't really impress me. I'll run away, Sinedra threatened. That would be very foolish, Aunt Pole said coldly. I'd just have to bring you back again, and you'd find that unpleasant. Affairs in the world just now are much too serious to allow the whims of one spoiled little girl to have very much importance. You'll stay with me, and you will stand in the Hall of the Raven King on your 16th birthday, even if I have to take you there in chains. We're all much too busy to pamper you any further. Sinedra stared at her, and then she suddenly burst into tears. I don't really blame her for that one. And that's the end of chapter 21. Sharky say, or when one member of the party attempts to force another member to give up a very powerful magical item. Then, of course, it didn't turn out that great for him. Broke up the party, then he was played by Sean Bean. Oh boy. That character. It's interesting how Tolkien wrote heroes to fail. I think there was a time when people were very unimpressed with Frodo, because Frodo fails in the end. I've seen some letters of Tolkien's rebutting that point. Well, somewhat, because Frodo did fail. So he's not rebutting that point. He's not rebutting that Frodo failed, but he's rebutting that it could have been possible for Frodo to succeed. Saying that, basically Frodo did better than anyone else could have done or been expected to do, but that it basically just wasn't possible for anyone to succeed at the task on his own. But it's interesting to think of people reading those books for the first time when they were new, and how, and getting emotional about it and being upset at Frodo as a character. Like thinking of Frodo as a failure. Sharky say, I seem to recall once hearing that, by the numbers, there's actually another big actor whose characters die with more frequency than Sean Bean. Right now you can't remember who it is. Interesting. Wonder why Sean Bean gets all the attention then. I think probably it's just that people noticed the trend. Well, it's 8:12. Let's see how long chapter 22 is. Ooh, chapter 22. Chapter 22 goes from page 237 to 249. So it might be a little long to start right now. And I'm not going to say anything more about that. Farmo says, John Hurt, Vincent Price, and Bela Lugosi. Yeah, I think that this is a good place to stop. But be sure to be here for Friday, because I promise it's going to be a good chapter. Farmo says, those three all died more on screen than Bean has. Let me look. John Hurt. Really? John Hurt, huh? Interesting. An interesting thing there is, let's see. They're all actually dead. So they're no longer making films. Farmer says Sean Bean just died in like 3 big name things, one after the other or something. And Sharky say, I think it's probably just that Sean Bean had more high profile ones in a short period of time. Yeah, so it's saying the same thing. And yeah, I mean, Sean Bean is still acting. So, in modern things. Sharky say, humans have a very short-term memory. I think it's understandable to be talking about someone who's still working. Pharma says, so he could outpace them potentially? Was it one of those 3 that you were thinking of, Sharkies? I'm curious. Or if there's someone else that Pharmos was not reading about. It's always fun seeing Vincent Price show up in older media, like on the Muppet Show or something like that. That's always great. I don't know if I've ever actually watched, off the top of my head, something that Vincent Price was like actively in, like as like a large role. Maybe. Pharma says Christopher Lee has apparently died a bunch too. John Hurt passed away in 2017, I think I just read. One of your favorite John Hurt roles was the Jim Henson series. Alright, well, I'm getting a bit hungry. We're going to make spaghetti tonight, most likely. Yeah. Something I'm going to wrap. Yes, the Storyteller. Yeah, I think we've talked about the Storyteller before. I'm pretty sure we've talked about it on this stream before at some point. Just conversation about something. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap things up and I'm going to go... Ooh, Friday is waffle day. Waffle and chicken. Are you still going to have Korean chicken with your waffles? And a pretty exciting chapter. It's going to be a good one, I promise. All right. Well, we will see you on Waffle Day. Have a good night, and yeah. Have a good rest of your week. See you Friday. Bye-bye.